The courtroom in Ridgefield District Court buzzed with the usual monotony of small-town justice, where wooden benches creaked under the weight of disinterested spectators, and the air hung heavy with the scent of polished oak and stale coffee, while fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on the faces below. Illuminating a scene that played out like clockwork behind the defendant's stand, stood Jamal Hayes, a lanky teenager with close-cropped hair and eyes that darted nervously around the room. At 17, he faced charges of grand larceny for allegedly stealing a high-end smartphone from a local electronics store. The evidence was thin: a grainy surveillance clip, a store manager's vague description, and the arresting officer's ironclad testimony. No fingerprints, no eyewitnesses beyond the clerk. But in Ridgefield, that was often enough. Officer Derek Harlan loomed at the side of the room, his uniform starched to perfection, arms crossed like barriers. With over 2 decades on the force, Harlan was a fixture in these proceedings. His badge gleamed under the lights, a symbol of unchallenged authority. He had survived 4 chiefs, dodging complaints like raindrops. His stare alone could quiet a whisper or make a lawyer fumble there. Notes today. His gaze fixed on Jamal with undisguised disdain to Harlan. The boy wasn't just a suspect, he was a symptom of societal issues, a recurring problem tied to preconceived notions Harlan held as truths. These young folks, he'd mutter in precinct break rooms, they're prone to mischief. No one challenged him, fear kept mouths shut. The prosecutor, a balding man named Victor Lang, droned through the indictment, twisting minor school infractions, 2 tardies, and a playground scuffle into a pattern of delinquency. The defense attorney, a harried public defender with a stack of cases taller than her desk, offered a limp objection before conceding. The judge, perched like a weary eagle, nodded along, ready to wrap things up. Harlan shifted his weight, satisfied. Another quick conviction, another notch in his belt. Then the side door swung open. A woman in a tailored coat strode in, clutching a leather briefcase. She was mid-30s, poised with hair pulled into a neat bun and an expression of quiet determination. Heads turned, but no one spoke. She moved to the front, ignoring the protocol of announcements or permissions. Harlan's instincts flared. Who was this intruder? No badge, no escort, just audacity. He stepped forward, blocking her path. "This is a closed proceeding." He growled, voice low but laced with menace. "State your business or get out." She met his eyes without flinching, her gaze steady as a blade. "I'm here for the defendant," she said calmly, not raising her voice. Harlan's face twisted. Another meddler, probably a relative, thinking she could play hero. He leaned in closer, his breath hot. "You folks always show up causing trouble," he hissed, the derogatory tones slipping out like venom. The room tensed, but silence held. No one intervened. Emboldened, Harlan's control snapped. He lashed out with a forceful shove, knocking her back. She stumbled, briefcase clattering, papers scattering like fallen leaves. Gasps echoed, but Harlan stood firm, chest heaving. "That's what happens when you disrupt justice." He snarled. The woman straightened, wincing but unbroken. She brushed off her coat and faced the judge. "Your Honor, my name is Elena Hayes. I was sworn in this morning as Ridgefield's new police chief." The words landed like thunder. Harlan froze. Color draining from his face, the courtroom erupted in whispers. His world tilted. The woman he'd pushed wasn't just anyone, she was his superior, the one who now held his fate. Elena didn't gloat. She gathered her papers methodically, her voice even. "Officer Harlan, your actions speak volumes about the force I've inherited." As deputies moved in, Harlan's mind raced. How had he missed this? Rumors of a new chief had circulated, but he dismissed them as token appointments. Now his empire of intimidation crumbled in seconds. Elena addressed the court. "This trial is tainted. We'll reconvene with proper oversight." Jamal, wide-eyed, watched his aunt, unbeknownst to most, take control. The session adjourned in chaos. Harlan led away in stunned silence. Words spread like wildfire. By afternoon, shaky cell phone footage hit social media. The shove, the harsh words, the reveal hashtags exploded. Chief pushed unfair badge protests formed outside the station, demands for Harlan's badge ringing out. Elena, bruised but resolute, held a brief internal meeting. "This isn't about one man," she told her team. "It's about rooting out the issues." Harlan, suspended pending review, paced his home, replaying the moment he'd built his career on authority. But now uncertainty gripped him. What secrets would surface? Old complaints, buried arrests, favors owed the city. Watched divided. Some defended Harlan as a dedicated officer. Others hailed Elena as a beacon. Elena's team unearthed initial cracks. Jamal's arrest stemmed from a mistaken identity. He'd found the phone and was returning it when Harlan arrived, assuming guilt based on appearance. Witnesses emerged, corroborating Jamal's innocence. Elena's first act as chief dropped the charges, but the real storm brewed. Harlan's history of questionable policing, suppressed reports, and a network of enablers in quiet moments. Elena reflected on her path from patrol officer to internal affairs, always fighting uphill. Now at the top, the fight intensified. Harlan, isolated, felt the noose tighten. The push wasn't just an incident. It was the spark igniting his downfall. As the sun dipped low over the courthouse, shadows lengthened, casting long patterns across the empty benches where earlier the drama had unfolded. Elena sat in her new office overlooking the town square, her side still aching from the encounter, but her resolve unshaken. She pored over preliminary files on Harlan, noting patterns of complaints dismissed as unfounded or resolved internally without follow-up. One case stood out: a young man, similar to Jamal, pulled over for a minor infraction that escalated into a full search based on nothing but suspicion. The report glossed over details, but Elena's trained eye saw the gaps. She made notes, planning to interview the complainant personally. Meanwhile, Harlan, at home, poured himself a drink, staring at his phone as notifications flooded in. Friends texting support mixed with cautious distance. He scrolled through comments on the video, some calling for his head, others lamenting the loss of strong law enforcement. He slammed the device down, frustration boiling over how had it come to this. He joined the force. Young, idealistic, but years of unchecked power had warped him into someone who saw threats in every shadow, especially those cast by people who didn't look like him across town. Jamal, reunited with family, hugged his mother tightly, the weight of the false accusation lifting but scars remaining. He thanked Elena quietly. "Auntie, you saved me." She shook her head. "No, Jamal, the system needs saving, and we're just starting." The night air cooled as Elena drove home, passing familiar streets lined with modest homes and flickering streetlights. Her mind raced with strategies, alliances to build within the department, officers to evaluate for loyalty to justice over Fording. Tradition. She knew change wouldn't come easy. Vested interests would push back, but the courtroom incident had given her leverage, public opinion on her side. For now, Harlan tossed in bed, sleep elusive visions of Elena's steady gaze haunting him. He rose, pacing the floor, contemplating his next move, perhaps a public apology or doubling down on his defense, but deep down he sensed the tide turning against him. The following morning, Elena arrived early to the station, greeting staff with firm handshakes and direct questions about procedures. She scheduled audits of recent cases, focusing on those handled by Harlan's unit. Discrepancies emerged: timestamps, altered witness statements abbreviated to favor the official narrative. One sergeant confided, "We've always done it this way, Chief." But Elena replied, "Not anymore. Transparency starts today." Protests grew outside, signs reading "Accountability now" and "Reform the force" waving in the breeze. Media vans parked nearby, reporters clamoring for statements. Elena stepped out briefly, addressing the crowd. "This department serves all of Ridgefield equally. We'll investigate thoroughly and act accordingly." Her words, calm, measured, inspired hope among the gathered, while Harlan, watching from home, felt a crust and sort of bypass chill. This woman wasn't backing down. As days passed, Elena's investigation deepened, uncovering emails where Harlan coordinated with superiors to bury complaints in exchange for favorable reviews. A web of mutual protection that kept problematic officers in pre-7 place. She documented everything, building a case, not just against Harlan, but the flawed structures. Enabling him, Jamal, inspired by events, volunteered at a local youth center, sharing his story to educate others on knowing their rights. His confidence grew, turning trauma into purpose. Harlan's lawyer advised, laying low but pride stung. He reached out to old contacts, seeking dirt on Elena, but found little. Her record spotless. Her rise earned through merit, not favoritism. Frustration mounted as more witnesses came forward. A former partner recounting instances of bias stops, another describing verbal intimidation in interrogations. The evidence mounted like bricks in a wall, closing in on Harlan. Elena, meanwhile, balanced the probe with daily duties, overseeing patrols, reviewing budgets, seeking ways to foster community trust. She initiated outreach programs, inviting residents to station tours and Q&A sessions. Slowly, bridges formed: skepticism giving way to tentative alliances one evening as rain pattered against windows. Elena reviewed footage from the courtroom again, noting the bystanders' inaction, a reminder that silence perpetuated injustice. She vowed to cultivate a culture where speaking up was encouraged, not punished. Harlan, alone in his study, drafted a statement denying wrongdoing, but his hands shook uncertainty. Creeping in for the first time, he questioned his methods, wondering if years of tough tactics had crossed lines into unfairness. The city buzzed with speculation. Editorials debated. Police reform letters to the editor poured in, some decrying Harlan as a relic of old ways, others warning against overcorrection. Elena read them all, gauging public pulse to guide her actions. Jamal's family hosted a small gathering, celebrating his freedom. Stories shared laughter, echoing a stark contrast to the courtroom tension. Elena attended briefly, her presence a symbol of hope, but she slipped away early. Work, calling the investigation's momentum, built subpoenas, issued records. Unsealed Harlan, summoned for questioning, arrived defiant but left shaken by pointed inquiries into specific cases. His denials rang hollow against documented proof. As weeks turned, the case against him solidified, charges pending his proselytization. Suspension likely permanent. Elena pressed. Knowing one conviction wouldn't suffice, systemic change required sustained effort. She proposed policy overhauls, mandatory training on bias de-escalation techniques, independent reviews for all complaints. The board, hesitant at first, approved, seeing the public's demand. Harlan, facing ruin, contemplated retirement, but ego resisted. He plotted, informally rallying sympathizers to undermine Elena's credibility. Rumors spread, whispers of her being too soft or politically motivated, but evidence countered them. Her actions speaking louder than words. Jamal, thriving, enrolled in classes aspiring to law enforcement reform from within, inspired by his aunt's example. The courtroom, once a stage for injustice, now symbolized potential for renewal. Elena reflected on that fateful day, the push that exposed cracks, allowing light in Ridgefield, stood at a crossroads, change inevitable but path uncertain. With leaders like Elena guiding the way, hope flickered brighter than before. The story unfolding one step at a time toward a more equitable future, where authority served, protected, and uplifted all citizens equally without prejudice or favoritism, building a community bound by trust rather than fear. In the aftermath of the courtroom upheaval, Ridgefield pulsed with a tense undercurrent of anticipation and division as Elena Hayes transformed her office into a hub of relentless scrutiny, where stacks of files towered like sentinels and digital screens flickered with timelines of past cases. Her team, a mix of trusted investigators and fresh recruits, worked late into the nights, cross-referencing reports and interviewing reluctant witnesses, while Harlan's suspension hung over the department like a storm cloud. He retreated to the corners of local gathering spots, places where neon signs buzzed faintly and conversations flowed in hushed tones. There he rallied a dwindling circle of former colleagues and sympathizers, nursing drinks and spinning narratives of injustice. "She's turning the force upside down," he'd say, voice laced with bitterness, "pushing some agenda that weakens us all." But even in those loyal enclaves, cracks began to show, with some nodding half-heartedly while others excused themselves early, sensing the shifting winds of accountability. Elena's probe delved deeper, uncovering a pattern of overlooked incidents that painted Harlan as more than a hot-tempered officer, but an architect of subtle manipulations. One report detailed a routine traffic stop that escalated into an unwarranted search of a vehicle owned by a minority driver, leading to planted evidence and a false charge of possession. The complainant, a delivery worker, had filed a grievance years ago, only for it to vanish into administrative limbo, dismissed as unsubstantiated without a single follow-up interview. Elena reinstated the case, pulling in the original officer involved for questioning. Under her watchful eye, admissions trickled out. "We followed Harlan's lead." Junior cop confessed he had a way of making things fit the narrative to keep stats high and funding flowing. Harlan, monitoring the developments from afar, scrolled through online forums where anonymous users debated the scandal. Viral clips of the courtroom incident morphed into memes and analyses, some defending him as a guardian of order under siege by progressive forces, others condemning his actions as emblematic of deeper flaws in the system. He contributed to these discussions under pseudonyms, stoking flames of doubt about Elena's motives, suggesting she was leveraging the event for personal gain. But paranoia set in as his inbox filled with alerts from supporters warning of subpoenas and leaks. Late one night, an anonymous message Arrived on his phone there. Coming for your old files, watch your back. He paced his living room, the walls closing in, realizing his network, once ironclad, now frayed at the edges. Elena, meanwhile, navigated her own challenges as resistance mounted from within and without. Anonymous letters slipped under her door, cryptic warnings scribbled in block letters about watching her steps and protecting her loved ones. One evening, as she left the station, shadows seemed to linger near her vehicle, a sense of being followed that she shook. Off with a detour through well-lit streets, reporting it discreetly to a trusted deputy who traced partial leads to informal contacts linked to Harlan's circle. Undeterred, she expanded the investigation, forming alliances with external auditors to review departmental finances, revealing how Harlan's high arrest rates had secured grants tied to performance metrics that disproportionately targeted certain neighborhoods, boosting budgets but eroding community trust. A whistleblower emerged, administrative clerk who'd handled paperwork for years, providing logs of altered timestamps and shredded documents that favored Harlan's version of events. Elena protected the source, ensuring anonymity while using the info to build airtight cases. The city itself fractured along invisible lines, with demonstrations swelling outside City Hall, crowds chanting for transparency and reform, while countergroups organized petitions supporting Harlan, portraying him as a dedicated servant, scapegoated for doing his job. Media outlets amplified the divide with interviews from residents, some recounting positive encounters with Harlan, like helping during emergencies, others sharing harrowing tales of unfair treatment that mirrored the complaints now resurfacing. Elena appeared on local news, redirecting focus. This is about building a better system for everyone, not personal vendettas. Her composure under fire earned quiet respect even from skeptics. Jamal, inspired by the unfolding events, channeled his energy into advocacy, joining panels at community centers to discuss rights and reporting misconduct. His voice steady as he described the fear of wrongful accusation, turning personal pain into public education. Harlan's arrest came on a crisp morning, officers knocking at his door with warrants for tampering and obstruction. He stood defiant in his doorway, demanding explanations, but complied, cuffs clicking around his wrists, a humiliating reversal from the rest. Man who'd once applied them, without hesitation transported to the station, he faced interrogation in a sterile room, mirrors reflecting his disheveled form. Investigators laid out evidence timelines of suppressed reports, audio clips from old meetings where he dismissed complaints as nuisances. His denials grew weaker as details mounted. I was maintaining order, he'd argue, but the room echoed with skepticism post-arrest. He was held in a holding cell, the isolation breeding unwelcome. Thoughts, memories of overlooked faces, and hasty judgments surfacing like ghosts. Elena's reforms gained traction amid the chaos. She implemented pilot programs for community oversight, inviting civilians to shadow patrols and review body camera footage, fostering dialogue that bridged gaps. One session saw officers sharing vulnerabilities, admitting to burnout and biases, leading to candid exchanges that humanized the badge. She also revamped training modules, incorporating scenarios based on real complaints to teach de-escalation over dominance. Early results showed fewer incidents and improved morale, though resistance lingered from veterans accustomed to old ways. Harlan, in detention, received sporadic visits from his lawyer, updating him on mounting charges. His family, distant, offered terse support, but the solitude forced introspection. He journaled sporadically, questioning the path that led here, from eager recruit to embattled figure. Had power blinded him to fairness? He wondered, staring at cell walls as days blurred. Elena anticipated sabotage, planting false leads to discredit her. A leaked document suggested impropriety in her promotion, but she countered with transparent records, turning the attempt into further evidence of obstruction, exposing more accomplices in Harlan's web indictments followed, pulling in mid-level supervisors who'd turned blind eyes for career advancement. The department underwent a quiet purge, not through firings but reassignments and retraining. Shifting culture from within, Jamal thrived, mentoring peers and collaborating with Elena on youth initiatives. His growth, a beacon of resilience amid turmoil. Harlan, paroled temporarily under house arrest, plotted informally, seeking ways to undermine the reforms, but his influence waned, former allies defecting to align with the new direction. One ex-partner confessed during a review board hearing, "We enabled shortcuts because it was easier," but no more. The admission rippled through ranks, encouraging others to come. Clean Elena's vision extended north, beyond punishment, advocating for restorative practices where officers met with affected communities to acknowledge harms and commit to change. One such meeting in a neighborhood hall saw tense but productive talks, tears shed, and understandings forged. Harlan, watching news coverage from home, felt a pang, not just of loss, but envy for the progress he once obstructed. As months passed, Ridgefield's narrative shifted from scandal to renewal, Elena's steady hand guiding the transition, while Harlan grappled with a future stripped of authority, pondering redemption in the shadows of his former life. The story of reform unfolding not in dramatic clashes but in the quiet persistence of accountability, building a foundation where trust could finally take root. With Harlan confined to the echoing halls of the correctional facility where concrete walls absorbed the murmurs of daily routines and distant clangs marked the passage of time, Ridgefield embarked on a phase of subtle yet profound transformation under Elena Hayes's guidance, shifting from the raw exposure of flaws to the meticulous crafting of sustainable progress. Her approach emphasized not swift overhauls, but layered initiatives that wove community voices into the fabric of law enforcement. One such program involved establishing neighborhood advisory circles where residents from diverse backgrounds met monthly with officers to discuss local concerns and co-develop safety strategies. These gatherings, held in community centers, filled with the aroma of shared potluck meals, fostered dialogues that turned strangers into collaborators, breaking down barriers through stories of everyday life. Elena personally attended the inaugural sessions, listening more than speaking, her presence a quiet affirmation that leadership meant service rather than command. Meanwhile, Harlan navigated the regimented world of incarceration, participating in mandatory group sessions, facilitated by counselors who encouraged participants to explore the origins of their choices. He sat in circles of folding chairs under buzzing lights, initially resistant, arms folded tightly but gradually opening up as peers shared vulnerabilities that mirrored his own upbringing in a community where authority was equated with unyielding strength. Had shaped his views, he realized, prompting him to voice tentative admissions. "I saw differences as threats, not as part of the whole." The words hung heavy in the air, marking small steps towards self-awareness, though the redemption remained a distant horizon. Elena's reforms extended to technological integrations, introducing an app for real-time feedback on interactions, allowing citizens to rate encounters anonymously with data aggregated into dashboards reviewed quarterly by mixed panels of officers and civilians. This tool not only highlighted positive trends but flagged patterns needing attention, leading to targeted workshops that addressed specific skills like active listening and cultural awareness. Early adopters praised the system for empowering voices that once felt unheard, while skeptics within the ranks gradually warmed as improved relations reduced on-duty stress. Jamal, now pursuing studies in public policy at a nearby university, channeled his experiences into research projects, analyzing data from Elena's portals to propose enhancements. His thesis on community-driven policing models drew attention from academic circles, earning him invitations to conferences where he presented with poise, transforming his ordeal into a catalyst for broader discussions on equity. Harlan received occasional updates through letters from a former mentor who detailed the city's changes. The descriptions stirred mixed emotions, envy at the progress mingled with regret for his role in hindering similar efforts. Years prior, he volunteered for facility programs, tutoring fellow inmates in basic literacy, finding unexpected fulfillment in moments of mutual learning that humanized those he'd once viewed through a lens of suspicion. Elena faced evolving hurdles as the spotlight intensified, with inquiries from other municipalities seeking blueprints for their own shifts. She hosted virtual seminars sharing frameworks without claiming expertise, emphasizing adaptation to local contexts over replication. One collaboration with a neighboring town involved joint training exercises, simulating scenarios drawn from real complaints. Promoting empathy through role reversal, participants emerged with newfound perspectives, forging interdepartmental bonds that strengthened regional networks. Subtle attempts at disruption continued, like fabricated online campaigns questioning the reform's costs. But Elena countered with transparent budget reports, demonstrating long-term savings from fewer litigations and higher retention rates. Her team traced one smear to a disgruntled retiree linked to past oversights, leading to educational outreach rather than punitive measures, turning potential adversaries into informed supporters. Jamal's advocacy expanded as he co-founded a nonprofit focused on youth empowerment, organizing workshops that blended legal education with creative arts, allowing participants to express experiences through storytelling and visual media. The initiative gained traction, partnering with schools to integrate modules into curricula, nurturing a generation equipped to engage constructively with authority. Harlan, upon qualifying for work release programs, took a modest job in facility maintenance. The manual labor, a stark contrast to his former command, but offering rhythm and reflection during quiet evenings. He penned letters to family, mending strained ties with honest accounts of his journey, acknowledging how his actions had rippled beyond the badge. Elena declined high-profile accolades like a national award for innovation, redirecting recognition to the collective effort. In a memo to her staff, she wrote, "Progress belongs to those who live it daily, not to titles or ceremonies." Her humility inspired internal morale, boosting voluntary participation in reform tasks. The city's influence radiated outward with articles in policy journals, citing Ridgefield as a case study in resilient change. Delegations visited, observing sessions and departing with actionable insights. One visitor, a policymaker from a distant state, remarked, "Your model proves that healing starts with humility, not heroics." Jamal's organization hosted its first summit, drawing attendees from across regions, featuring panels on sustainable trust building, where survivors of past injustices shared stages with reformed practitioners. The event, streamed online, amplified messages of unity and perseverance. Harlan, paroled after serving his term, relocated to a quiet suburb embracing anonymity. He pursued counseling certification, volunteering at support groups for those navigating life post-authority. His sessions emphasized accountability as a lifelong practice, finding purpose in guiding others away from paths he trod. Elena walked the evolving streets of Ridgefield, noting subtle signs of renewal, like increased foot traffic in once avoided areas, and officers greeting residents by name. Her evenings often spent reviewing feedback loops, ensuring the system remained dynamic, responsive to emerging needs. The echoes of renewal resonated not in grand declarations, but in the everyday harmony of a community reclaiming its narrative, where past divisions gave way to shared aspirations, fostering an environment of mutual respect and enduring vigilance. As years unfolded, Ridgefield stood as a living testament to the power of persistent, equitable evolution.